I frequently get questions about everyday carry items such as folding pocket knives, utility knives, work knives, and all those kind of things. So I thought I'd do a quick video here just to explain the main rules that these apply. Now, just as a few caveats, first of all, none of these are sponsored placements in this video. I'm always very open if I partner with any company on this channel, and in this video I am not. But I will tell you who they are. The second caveat is that I don't advocate the carrying of knives around in public for the main reason that there are far too many knife attacks, and that's unpleasant. But what I'm talking about here are predominantly tools, either the tool in the form of a folding pocket knife, because the law understands and recognizes the fact that you might want to carry these for some good reason. And good reason is something I'll come back to in a minute, because that applies to any other blade that isn't caught as the exemption of a folding pocket knife. And the law recognizing that those are tools doesn't want to interfere with the rights of somebody to carry these things. Now, and the third caveat, of course, is that this is not legal advice in any way whatsoever, because it doesn't pertain to your particular circumstances and the way in which you carry these things and so on. And so with all of that out of the way, let's take a look. Let's start with this one here. So this is obviously a work utility knife. Now, the key bit about this is that obviously you'll be familiar with these. It has a push and slide function to open the blade, and then the blade is stuck in the open position. So the point being that you cannot now close this blade without the press of a button. Now that differs from the Spyderco, which has an immediately foldable at all times blade, because it is not locked in any open position. It clicks, and that is the open position, but then it is immediately foldable. So it doesn't stick in an open position. Now, many people have criticized this. Now, I'm not a knife expert. I can tell you about the law, but I'm not a knife expert. Many people say that the non-locking form of this knife makes it dangerous. Now, that might be the case, but it does click, so it takes a little bit of force to close it, but it doesn't actually completely lock. It is immediately foldable at all times. Now, this is it's a very nice pocket knife to carry around to do little things with. It is, again, I stress this is not a sponsored or placement or anything of the kind, but this is from, I bought this from Knives and Tools. It's not a cheap item. I think this is a slight variation on the one that I bought, but nonetheless, that's where I got it from. I don't carry it around, for that matter. I keep it at home for opening parcels. But the law is contained within Section 139 of the Criminal Justice Act 1988, which is the offence of having a bladed or pointed article in a public place. Now, in short, this applies to everything that is not a folding pocket knife, and a folding pocket knife is one which case law has determined to be one that is immediately foldable at all times, and the blade does not exceed 3 inches. And so this is I believe it's exactly 3 inches, 7.4 centimeters, I believe, is exactly 3 inches. So this is a 3-inch blade and is immediately foldable at all times. Now, moving to a different knife here, this is an M-Tech USA knife. Now, this is a locking knife. So this is not illegal to own, but it is illegal to carry without a good reason. Now, it's illegal to carry without a good reason because it locks. So although this blade is, I think, longer than 3 inches, but even if the blade was only 3 inches, it has a locking mechanism, because this portion here is a press to release the locking function to then close the blade. So because this locks, it is not a folding pocket knife. Therefore, coming back to the law, it is an offence to have one in public without a good reason. Now, a good reason is not an excuse. So if you forgot that you had it and that's the excuse, that is not a good reason. Now, the good reason bit I will come back to in a little bit more detail in a moment, but some good reasons, and it says without prejudice to the generality of Section 4. So aside from a general good reason referred to in Section 4, which I will come back to, it is an offence if you can show that you have the article with you for work, for religious reasons, or part of a national costume. Now, obviously, for work would be something like this or any other kind of blade that you have for work. Religious reasons, there are certain blades that are exempt for religious reasons, and of course, aside from religion, part of any national costume. So coming back to the generality of a good reason, let's say for argument's sake you're going camping or fishing. With the fishing, it might depend on what kind of fishing you're doing and what kind of knife you might need to use. Now, I'm no fishing expert either, but I am reliably informed that certain types of fishing require certain types of knives and so on, and so that might then be a good reason. If you're going climbing and you need, for safety purposes, a knife that will cut the rope, and it may need to be bigger than a folding pocket knife or whatever, then technically you're in a public place, you might have a rope, but you've got the rope for safety reasons. You might be going camping. You might need the knife for craft work, woodwork, or anything else that you might need it for when you're going camping, and therefore having it with you whilst you're camping is a good reason. But as I said earlier, a good reason is not an excuse. So it cannot just be an excuse. So you can't, for argument's sake, you can't just say, well, I had this thing with me at work and I forgot it in my pocket for the last 3 days and that's why it's in my pocket. That's an excuse, but it's not a good reason. A good reason might be that you had it for work and you literally have to stop somewhere on the way home and you had nowhere else to put it because you didn't have a vehicle or whatever, and therefore that's the reason you had it with you. But any of these good reasons should stand up to strict scrutiny and cross-examination, which if you were detained for possession of a bladed article in a public place, you would need to thoroughly explain and stand up to those questions. But then, of course, we get all sorts of other questions about utility knives like Swiss Army style knives, which are full of utilities and have a knife in there. Most of them, to my knowledge, don't actually lock, and most of them are under 3 inches in length. So in that case, provided that they meet the exemption under section 139, which is not more than 3 inches, it's immediately foldable, that would qualify as a folding pocket knife, and this section would not apply. However, there are some sweeping caveats to all of this, because if you have them in certain areas, you may be under more scrutiny, such as schools, hospitals, courts, and places. It should be quite obvious that you'll be put under much more scrutiny going to those areas. And particularly in courts, you'll be searched and you should volunteer it. Throughout my days going in and out of court, I've seen all sorts of things come out of pockets and handed to security or confiscated by security. And having them taken off you should, of course, not be surprising. The other big sweeping caveat is you cannot just think to yourself that because this is a folding pocket knife that you can take it out for the purposes of self-defense. Because if you're taking it out for self-defense, you're taking it with the intent of causing harm to somebody. Now, there has been a lot of debate in the courts as to what is an offensive weapon. And there's been lots of debate over things like kubatans, which is the small metal objects, not the hollow ones, which are banned, but the standard ones, which don't have points inside and things like that. The question's been raised as to whether that is an offensive weapon. And in many of those cases, the answer has been no. Per se, it's not an offensive weapon. So, for example, this by itself would not be an offensive weapon per se, meaning it is not automatically an offensive weapon. It depends what you're doing with it. Because if you use something with the intent of causing harm, that can make something that is not ordinarily an offensive weapon an offensive weapon. And so anything in that sense could potentially be an offensive weapon if it is carried for the purposes of causing harm. If you happened to have something with you and you happened to use it in self-defense, it would be more difficult to justify the use of a blade in self-defense, and you might well be questioned as to whether you carried it for that purpose, which is why it makes it much more difficult. But very broadly speaking, those are the general rules and principles about having a blade or pointed article in a public place. That's what qualifies as a folding pocket knife, as against something else which clearly has a locking blade, such as this one here, or as a locking blade with a thumb opener, such as this one here. So that would not be permissible to carry in public without a good reason, such as work, camping, or any other good reason that you needed the knife with you. So I hope that's helpful. Please do drop a comment, drop a like and a subscribe, and all that great stuff that helps my channel grow. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.